Imagine this scene: a military test facility, a nuclear bomb about to detonate. Suddenly, a vehicle enters the restricted zone. A lone man rushes to save the person inside the vehicle. There's a countdown going on. Countdowns are designed to, be stopped if something goes wrong. But this countdown can't be stopped. The heroic man manages to reach the civilian and throw them into a ditch, saving their life. But he is exposed to the full, blinding force of the atomic blast. Days later, he's transformed into a towering, enraged man who goes on a terrifying rampage. Now, which story are we talking about? Is this Dr. Bruce Banner, the mild-mannered scientist, diving to save young Rick Jones from a ghetto bomb, only to become the Incredible Hulk? Or is this Colonel Glenn Manning, rushing to save a single-engine pilot, exposed to an atomic test, transforming him into the Amazing Colossal Man? For decades, popular culture has been obsessed with the idea of radiation as a catalyst for monstrous transformations and superhuman powers. It's a trope that defined an era. Fiend Without a Face is one of those 1950s movies that utterly captivated me. Even though I'm a 60s baby and first saw it in the mid-70s, it exemplifies a common trend running through many Cold War-era monster movies. Atomic energy, from Godzilla to the giant ants in Them and the massive grasshoppers in the beginning of the end, all were attributed to radiation exposure. Radiation even gave us the Incredible Shrieking Man, the 4D Man. But the reality of significant radiation exposure is usually far more mundane and arguably more horrific. Usually, we just die. Sometimes it's cancer. Sometimes you're not lucky enough to live long enough to develop cancer. During the Cold War, nuclear war and its inevitable radioactive fallout became an obsession. I can honestly tell you that in the 80s, I genuinely feared witnessing what Sarah Connor saw happen in that fiery playground, and the same from Terminator 2. The difference was, in the 80s, we had NPR, PBS, I had Science Magazine, which I subscribed to. In the 50s, public understanding of nuclear energy, or even the vastness of the universe, was practically non-existent.
We must know how to duck and cover in the school bus or in any other bus or streetcar. Duck and cover. Don't wait. Duck away from the windows fast. The glass may break and fly through the air and cut you. If you do not know just what to do, ask your teacher when this film is over. Discuss what you could do in different places if a bomb explodes.
Remember what to do, friends. Now tell me right out loud. What are you supposed to do when you see the flash? Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
Today, we have on-demand access to all sorts of information about nuclear energy and particles, how nuclear bombs work, how fallout works. We can look up at will what happens when we're exposed to radiation, what kind of mutations occur. When I was a child, this is the kind of information you would have to travel to a library and go to the reference section to find. And actually, before that, when my sister was a child, it might even be classified, theatrical data. A person writing a screenplay for a movie in 1952 simply wouldn't have had access to this information. They might have heard something that may have been accurate on the radio about nuclear bombs or about fallout or about mutations, but they only heard it once, and personal recorders weren't around. The average person couldn't record a show and listen to it later, even just audio. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, billions and billions of people were suddenly exposed to the new concepts of radiation and mutation. The problem is, in horror stories, sci-fi, and comic books, mutation is almost universally portrayed as successful.
They taunted him. They tormented him until he had a horrifying accident and fell into a vat of nuclear waste, transforming little Melvin into a hideously deformed creature of superhuman size and strength. Melvin became the Toxic Avenger.
By successful, I mean useful, even if that utility is just being deadly. It doesn't cause cancer. It doesn't kill the host. It enhances, empowers. It even elevates individuals into godhood. You were exposed to radiation, and now you're a monster. The definition of monster is something that can't be stopped. That's pretty successful. But that's simply not what mutation typically is. Sure, slight mutations will give us outstanding athletes, but so will hard work. But some athletes are outright mutants with a very slight mutation that gives them a little edge. But these are natural mutations. Usually, if a mutation is significant, it means illness, deformity, breakdown of tissues, or worse. In evolution, a mutation is random and often uneventful. It's not intentional. A longer foot here, a shorter neck there, even if you don't need it, even if it's not beneficial. You can have a gnat with a longer eyelash that never benefits the gnat. You can acquire a mutation and pass it on for 1,000 generations that does nothing. It's just something that happened. If it happens to confer a minimal, random advantage, it might just allow an organism to survive long enough to pass that mutation on. For example, over millions of years, if oxygen levels in your environment are decreasing, you might not notice, but individuals with a slight genetic mutation for more efficient oxygen utilization run farther, chase down lions, they dive and catch more fish, they have more children, and pass on that adaptation to a new generation, none of whom feel their oxygen is that low at all. They're not struggling. They're not trying to adapt. Conversely, the reason giant dragonflies with their 2.5-foot wingspans hoo around was precisely because Earth's atmosphere was incredibly oxygen-rich then, sometimes 30 to 35% compared to 20% now, usually. There were even more wildfires back then because of more oxygen. There's simply not enough oxygen in the air right now to sustain such mammoth insects. And by the way, if a velociraptor or a Tyrannosaurus Rex was chasing you down, it might have to slow down and catch its breath. Ooh, can't catch those humans, and I think sure can run far. Because velociraptors were used to running around in 30 to 35% oxygen in the late Cretaceous period. The velociraptor is not from the Jurassic period. It's from the late Cretaceous period, which had higher oxygen levels than now. Needless to say, everything that makes a monster or a superhero special often comes at an immense biological cost. A 60-foot man couldn't support his own weight. Long before he reached that height, and actually 250,000 pounds, that's how much a 60-foot tall man would weigh, his heart would fail. He'd need a completely redesigned circulatory system, maybe a couple of more hearts. The movie The Amazing Colossal Man actually tried to consider this. The character was slated to die when he was around 18 feet tall, but they managed to keep him alive. But because his circulation couldn't reach his brain properly, he became demented and cannibalistic. But facts and biology rarely stopped an entire generation of monster willies and superhero stories from depicting radiation as a power source. Consider the Fantastic Four, Daredevil, whose eyes were taken out by a radioactive canister, and Spider-Man, though his origin is now muddied with genetic tampering beyond a radioactive spider, and of course the king of them all, Superman, deriving his powers from solar radiation. Speaking of the Hulk, his origin now isn't as simple as a gamma blast as it once was. Modern interpretations, primarily in the MCU, lean into a more complex backstory, incorporating gun radiation combined with elements of a super soldier serum, but it's all hazy. They don't show it, which is actually a good thing. It's not a great thing to explain your sci-fi science. The MCU's Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, was exposed to energy from an explosion that could be interpreted as a form of radiation. The original Marvel received his power differently. Born a Kree, an advanced alien race, similar to Asgardians, he possessed inherent superhuman strength, speed, durability, and a longer lifespan. Kree are just powerful people. Marvel was also an undercover soldier and used negabands.
What did he say?
Negabands, which significantly enhanced his powers. These negabands.
What did he say?
Negabands also enabled his unique bond with Rick Jones. Yes, the same Rick Jones that Bruce Banner saved. When Rick clapped the negabands together, he'd swap places with Marvel, sending himself into the negative zone and bringing Marvel into our universe. This mechanism sounds very reminiscent of the original Captain Marvel, Shazam. He was called Captain Marvel until DC Comics sued, claiming copyright infringement on Superman. DC Comics won, taking Captain Marvel off the market, off the shelves. And Fawcett Comics lost the trademark of Captain Marvel, which Marvel picked up. This is why you almost never hear DC's Shazam referred to as Captain Marvel today. In the comic books, Carol Danvers received her powers through an explosion that sent radiation through the original Captain Marvel, sort of filtering his powers and then passing them through her. This same type of thing happens with Superman. For instance, when Superman is on one end of a circuit and you're on the other, and you become electrocuted through him, he can pass his powers on to you in some storylines. Of course, this goes against the whole Kryptonian physiology thing. MCU's Monica Rambeau, when she grew up and starred in WandaVision, gained her powers from 3 exposures to a Higgs field that actively rewrote matter. This is quite different from her origin in comics, which is actually very similar to Carol Danvers' origin in the MCU. Monica Rambeau blasted a machine that she didn't want to get into evil hands and took on the energy to become Captain Marvel. Again, radiation doesn't work this way. During the Cold War, without the internet, information about radiation was scarce, allowing movies to run wild. Nuclear energy was a mysterious force that did mysterious things. Anything exposed to radiation seemed to grow giant, whether it was a creature from the beach from 20,000 fathoms, or a Godzilla, or a Gamera. Consider the real-world science and Fiend without a face. Let me explain Fiend without a face. A scientist was experimenting with telekinesis. And somehow, because there was a nuclear power plant nearby, his mind became corporeal. These invisible brains with spinal cords were crawling around like scorpions, jumping on people's necks and evening out their spinal cords. The writers seemed to know so little about radiation that the script wouldn't pass muster in a middle school today. For example, in the 2014 Godzilla movie, despite its own improbable radiation physics, the Godzilla writers would never suggest blowing up a nuclear power plant to starve monsters of energy. Most people now understand that blowing up a nuclear power plant would actually contaminate the area with radiation, and also that nuclear reactors are massive facilities with all sorts of shielding. And you're not going to go to a shed and grab a few sticks of dynamite to blow up a nuclear power. Yet in Fiend Without a Face, the monsters survived on a radiation miles away. And they got rid of that radiation and killed those monsters by blowing up the facility with some handy dynamite. And radiation certainly wouldn't reach monsters over miles, over hills and trees like that. Don't make me explain the inverse square law again. But how else do you explain beings with immense power like Godzilla, the Hulk, or Superman? We infuse them with invisible, mysterious radiation. Spiders bite people all the time. None of us turn into Spider-Man. Just throw in radiation. Since that doesn't work today, We throw in genetic engineering and conspiracies to muddy the science. I imagine that after some nuclear tests in the past, some dog or a coyote was exposed to radiation and later bit someone, but no one has ever turned into a dog man. Wait, this is not that kind of channel. But that might explain some things, wouldn't it? But what is radiation, really? It's best described like a machine gun, firing billions and billions of tiny invisible bullets. While not all radiation is made up of particles that have mass, it's a helpful analogy to understanding its damaging potential. It's energy traveling through space or medium. We broadly categorize radiation in two main types. Ionizing radiation, the type that we should be careful of. It has enough energy to strip electrons from atoms, creating ions. This damages living tissue and DNA, leading to health issues. Think of it as a type of radiation that turns one matter into another. Then we have non-ionizing radiation. Signals pass through your body all the time without changing your flesh, without changing your DNA, without changing you at all. So let's have some reality checks right here. What would happen with all these origin stories? Fantastic Four, for instance, where one man became Mr. Fantastic and can stretch. One woman became the Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, who can generate force fields. We have Johnny Storm, who can fly and became a Human Torch. And of course, the Fang, with incredible strength, similar to the Hulk. If you were to fly up into space and there were a cosmic storm where the cosmic rays are so concentrated they're visible, then what you would actually have is instant death. But let's go easy on them. They'll have illness and death. Bruce Banner, at that gamma bomb. Instant, crispy death. Vaporized. Colonel Glenn Manning, toast. Vaporized. Instant death. Peter Parker, a little bacteria maybe. If he's allergic to a spider bite, maybe he might have some anaphylactic shock. The spider that bit him, death. But what are the most plausible examples of radiation exposure in comics and movies? Let's go back to Wanda, Carol Danvers, and Malika Rambeau. At least in the MCU, hear me out. The Infinity Stones were semi-sentient forces of change. Wanda was born a witch, but she was intensely exposed to the Mind Stone, and later she collected the energy of witch power stolen by Agatha Harkness over the centuries. This transformed her. Actually, transformed her twice. Carol Danvers was exposed to energy from the Space Stone. Malika Rambeau and WandaVision was exposed 3 times to a hex field that actively rewrote reality. That's a different, more complex beast than mere radiation. When you think about the Fantastic Four, you don't need to go into a storm to encounter radiation. Space is incredibly radioactive. I mean like ground zero radioactive. You'd have local radiation from the sun and ambient radiation from the universe all around us. Cosmic rays coming in from every direction. The source of them being exploding stars, active galactic cores. Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere protect us like many feet of lead from being turned into the Hulk if radiation to do that. Even as far as Uranus, the sun's radiation is deadly. Your spaceship would not receive much heat from the sun at that distance, but you would be bombarded with a healthy dose, or I should say an unhealthy dose, of radiation anywhere in the solar system. In fact, believe it or not, there is no truly safe distance from the sun within our solar system, not without adequate shielding. Earth's atmosphere protects us from a hailstorm of all sorts of radiation. We are not in a Goldilocks zone. We've seen Peter Quill in the Guardians of the Galaxy freeze in space twice. If only it were just the cold and the lack of pressure to worry about. Characters like the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Ravagers and anyone who spacewalks, especially within a solar system, are exposing themselves to immense radiation. And again, this does not even include cosmic rays striking from all directions, even far from any sun, even in intergalactic space. Cosmic rays abound. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Bruce Banner reminds you of Colonel Glenn Manning? And when Firestorm is around, is he shortening the lives of all the other Justice League members? And would you run out in front of a gamma bomb to save Whit Jones? By the way, Marvel wants you to know that the Hulk is not based on Colonel Glenn Manning. He's based on Back to Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein. Wink, wink.